I want to tell you something about the moment your whole life reorganizes itself. It doesn't feel the way you think it will. There's no music, no slow motion revelation, no version of you standing in a beam of light understanding everything at once. What actually happens is this. You're standing in your sister's kitchen in Brooklyn at 6 in the morning. You're wearing mismatched socks. You're holding a coffee cup that went cold 20 minutes ago. And somewhere between the second and third sip, you realize the person you were 3 weeks ago no longer exists. She took a housekeeping job in Buckhead. The person standing in this kitchen has a father. Those are not the same woman. I had 3 weeks between Atlanta and Seoul. Chairman Baek, Taewon, had been careful about it. No pressure. His exact words, delivered in a phone call that lasted 11 minutes and felt like standing at the edge of something very high. Come when you're ready. There is no deadline. But I want you to know, the house is prepared, your room is prepared. Whatever you need to feel, whatever time you need, I will wait. I sat with that for a long time. Your room is prepared. I had never had a room prepared for me in my life. Every room I'd ever occupied, I'd had to make my own, drag my personality into the corners, put something on the walls, convince the space I belonged in it. Somewhere in Seoul, in a house I'd never seen, a room had been prepared. For me. I booked the flight on a Tuesday. Seoul hit me before I even left the airport. The scale of it, the speed. Incheon was larger than any airport I'd been in, moving walkways and duty-free corridors that stretched further than made sense, signs in Korean and English running parallel like two rivers that never quite merged. I stood at the arrivals exit with my 2 bags and my carry-on, and the small envelope Taewon had sent, containing a single card with an address written in his handwriting, Korean on one side, English on the other. And I thought, Dorothy Carter stood somewhere in this city once. She was 24 years old, and she was in love, and she had no idea what was coming. I picked up my bags, I walked outside, the car was already there, Taewon was in the back seat. I hadn't expected that. He'd said he would send a car, he hadn't said he would be in it. He looked different in Seoul. Same suit, same silver hair, same deliberate stillness. But here, with the Han River appearing between buildings as we crossed the bridge, with the city moving outside the window in a way that made clear this was his city, his language, his 30 years. He looked like himself in a way he hadn't in Atlanta. In Atlanta, he'd been a visitor. Here he was the chairman of Baek Group, and I was the woman in the backseat of his car who had cut chrysanthemums in his guest house 2 months ago. How was the flight, he said. Long, I said. Something that was almost a smile. Yes, it always is. We drove in silence for a while. The kind of silence that doesn't need filling. They know you're coming, he said finally. Junho and Sungmin. Yunhee, he paused. I told them myself, 3 weeks ago, the day I returned from Atlanta. How did that go? I said. Not a question. About as well as you'd expect, he said. I looked out the window. The Han River was wide and gray and moving fast. Are you afraid? He said. I thought about it honestly. No, I said. I've been invisible my whole life. Invisible in other people's houses. Invisible in rooms where I was the only one who looked like me. I paused. I know how to walk into a room that doesn't want me. I've been doing it for 6 years professionally. He was quiet for a moment. You won't be invisible here, he said. Not anymore. I want you to know that. I know, I said. And I did know. That was the thing that had changed. The estate was at the foot of Bugaksan Mountain in Jongno-gu, Old Seoul, the kind of address that didn't need explaining to anyone who understood what addresses meant in this city. The gates were black iron, tall. The driveway curved through manicured grounds, dark pine trees, a stone garden, a low traditional wall running the length of the property. The main house was a combination of traditional Korean architecture and modernized additions, dark wood and white stone, clean lines, a roof line that curved upward at the corners the way they do in old Korean buildings, like the house was reaching for something. I stepped out of the car. Cold Seoul air, the smell of pine and stone and something older underneath both. I stood in the driveway with my 2 bags and looked at the house. The house looked back. They were waiting in the foyer, all 3 of them. Junho first, Taewon's eldest son, mid-40s. A face that would have been handsome if it weren't so carefully arranged into neutrality. He had his father's cheekbones and his wife's habit of presenting a version of himself rather than himself. He stood slightly ahead of the others, the eldest, assuming the position of reception. Beside him, Sung-min, the younger son, late 30s. Sharper features, a mouth that rested in a slight curve that could have been amusement or contempt, and was probably both. His eyes moved to me immediately and stayed there with an attention that was not hostile. It was assessing, the way a chess player looks at a new piece on the board. And behind them both, 3 steps back, Yeon-hee. She had chosen her position carefully. Not at the front, that would look too confrontational. Not at the back, that would look defeated. 3 steps back, slightly elevated on the foyer's second step, so she was looking down at the entrance. Control, disguised as composure. She looked at me the way you look at something you've planned extensively for. Taewon walked in behind me. "This is Jade Carter," he said. His voice filled the foyer the way his voice filled every room, without effort, without performance. Simply present and therefore authoritative. "My daughter. She will be staying in the East Guest Suite. She will be treated as a member of this family." He paused. "In every way that means something. Not as a formality." Junho stepped forward, extended his hand. "Welcome," he said, in English. Careful, correct English, practiced. "We're glad you made the journey." I shook his hand. He wasn't glad, but he wasn't cruel. I could work with not cruel. Sung-min stepped forward next. His handshake was different, quicker, more deliberate, accompanied by a look that said, "I've already figured out how this benefits me, and I'll tell you when the time is right." "Jade," he said. Just my name, like we'd already met and were past introductions. I looked at him steadily. "I see you," I thought. "I see exactly what you are." Then Yeon-hee. She descended the foyer step, crossed to me, took my hand in both of hers, a gesture of warmth so precisely calibrated it was almost impressive. "Jade," she said, "I'm glad you're here." She was not glad I was here, but she had decided. In the 3 weeks since Atlanta, I could see it in every line of her, that opposition had failed, and management was the only tool she had left. I was not going to be manageable, but I smiled. "Thank you, Yeon-hee," I said. Her hands tightened on mine, just slightly, just enough to tell me she understood. The room they'd prepared was on the east side of the main house. Large, traditional furniture, dark wood, low platform bed, paper screens over the windows that turned the light amber when the sun came through. A writing desk, fresh flowers in a vase on the dresser, white chrysanthemums. I stood in the doorway looking at them for a long time. Then I walked in, set my bags down, and went to the desk. Someone had left a note, handwritten, in English. The handwriting was not Taewon's. "Miss Carter, I have worked in this house for 31 years. I knew your mother. When you are ready, I would like to speak with you. My name is Mrs. O." I read it 3 times. Then I sat down on the edge of the bed. 31 years. She had been in this house when Dorothy Carter's letter arrived in 1992. She had been in this house when it was intercepted. She had been in this house for every year of the 30 years after that, and she was still here, waiting. Right here, I need to stop and ask, who is watching this with me right now? Drop a comment and tell me where you are and what time it is. Because Mrs. O, this woman who has been in that house for 31 years, she knows things about my mother that nobody else alive knows. And what she tells me is going to change everything I thought I understood about why that letter never arrived. Tell me you're here. Let's keep going. I found Mrs. O at 5:45 in the morning. She was in the kitchen, not cooking, not cleaning, sitting at the small staff table at the far end, both hands wrapped around a ceramic cup, looking at nothing, waiting. She was in her late 60s. Small, compact, and precise in the way of someone who had spent decades learning to take up exactly the right amount of space and no more. Silver hair cut short and neat, a plain dark work uniform, the face of someone who had seen a great deal and chosen carefully what to do with what she'd seen. She looked up when I came in, and something happened to her face that I can only describe as relief. Not surprise, not discomfort, relief. Like something she had been carrying for a very long time had just gotten a little lighter. "Miss Carter," she said. "Mrs. O," I said. "You knew my mother." "Yes," she said simply. "Sit down. I'll make tea." She told me in the careful, measured way of someone who has rehearsed something for years and is finally saying it out loud. "I was 28 when I started working here," she said. "The chairman's father was still alive. It was a different house then, stricter, more formal. When Chairman Taewon came back from Atlanta in 1991, I noticed immediately that he was different." She paused, poured the tea. "He didn't eat properly for months. He worked from before dawn until after midnight. He sent his assistant away twice for no reason, and then called him back. He was hollowed. That is the word I would use. Like something had been removed from him. I held my cup. I didn't know about your mother until 1992, she said. A letter arrived. International post. American stamps. I was the one who received the household mail in those days. She stopped. I brought it to the chairman's study. His father was there. They were in a meeting. She looked at her cup. The chairman's father took the letter from me before I could say anything. He looked at the return address, and he told me to go. The kitchen was very quiet. He intercepted it, I said. Yes, she said, and you knew. I suspected, she said carefully. The chairman asked me 3 days later if any international mail had arrived for him. I told him what I had seen. His father in the study. The letter taken. She paused. He went to his father. I don't know what was said, but the letter was never given to him, and your mother's name was never spoken in this house again. She looked at me directly. Until now. I set my cup down. Mrs. O, I said. The letter, do you know what happened to it? She was quiet for a long moment. The chairman's father kept everything, she said. Every document, every record. He believed that information was the only currency that mattered. She paused. He passed away in 2009. His study was sealed for 3 years. The chairman couldn't bring himself to go through it. She looked at me steadily. It was opened in 2012. I helped catalog the contents. Another pause. Miss Carter, I found the letter. The blood in my ears. Where is it? I said. I kept it, she said simply. I didn't know who to give it to. I didn't know if it was my place. I didn't know. She stopped. Started again. I kept it because it felt wrong to destroy it. It felt wrong to deliver it without knowing what it would do to him. She folded her hands on the table. I have been waiting for the right time for 11 years. She reached into the pocket of her work uniform, placed a small envelope on the table between us. White, faded at the corners with age. American stamps. 1993 postmark, Atlanta, Georgia. Addressed in handwriting I recognized from birthday cards and grocery lists, and the small notes my mother used to leave in my lunchbox when I was 7 years old. To Mr. Baek 1 Baek Family Residence Jongno-gu, Seoul-gu. And in the bottom left corner, in my mother's careful handwriting, a single word she always wrote on important letters. Personal. I looked at it for a long time. Has anyone else read it? I said. No, Mrs. O said. Not to my knowledge. His father opened it to confirm who it was from, but I don't believe he read past the first line. I picked it up. The paper was thin, worn at the fold lines. It had been opened once 30 years ago, and then sealed again and put away. I opened it. My mother's handwriting. 1993. She was 26 years old. Taewon. I've started this letter 4 times. I keep throwing it away because I don't know how to say what I need to say without it sounding like I'm asking for something. I'm not asking for anything. I want you to know that before you read the rest. I had a baby. Her name is Jade. She was born March 14th, 1992. She has your eyes. That specific way your eyes go very still when you're thinking something you're not ready to say out loud. She does it already, and she's not even 1. I didn't tell you when you left because you had enough weight to carry. I still believe that. But I've been sitting with this for a year, and I think you have a right to know she exists, even if you can't be here. Even if nothing changes, you have a right to know. She's healthy, she's loud. She laughs like something got switched on inside her, and nobody told her how to switch it off. She's the best thing I've ever done. I'm not writing to ask you to come back. I'm not writing to ask you for anything at all. I'm writing because she's going to grow up one day and ask me about her father. And I want to be able to tell her honestly that I gave you the chance to know her existed. If you want to know her, write back. If you can't, I understand. I've always understood. Take care of yourself, Taewon. Dorothy, I folded the letter along its original creases, set it on the table. Mrs. O was watching me. I didn't say anything for a long time. Outside the kitchen window, Seoul was waking up. The sound of the city coming alive beyond the estate walls, distant and relentless and indifferent the way cities always are. My mother had been 26 years old. She had written this letter knowing it might not be answered. She had offered him everything. the knowledge of my existence, the chance to know me, and asked for nothing in return. And someone had taken it from the hallway table and put it in a drawer. For 30 years. He never knew, I said. No, Mrs. O said. He never knew. I picked the letter back up. I need to give this to him, I said. Yes, Mrs. O said. I think you do. She reached across the table and put her hand briefly over mine, the same gesture Taewon had made in the East sitting room in Atlanta, his hand over mine. Now hers, your mother, she said quietly, would have liked Seoul. I think she would have liked it very much. I looked at this woman, 68 years old, 31 years in this house, who had kept my mother's letter in her pocket for 11 years, waiting for the right person to give it to. Thank you, I said. It was the only thing that was large enough and small enough at the same time. Don't thank me, she said. I should have found a way sooner. That is something I will carry. She looked at me steadily. But you're here now. That's what matters. I carried the letter back to my room. Not to read again. I'd read it once and that was enough. Reading it a second time felt like something I wasn't entitled to do without him. It was his letter. It had always been his letter. My mother had written it for him, not for me. I set it on the writing desk next to the white chrysanthemums. Then I sat in the chair by the paper screen window and watched Seoul morning light come through the amber panels and thought about a woman who was 26 years old in 1993, sitting at a kitchen table in Vine City, Atlanta, writing a letter to a man in Seoul she had decided to stop waiting for, but wanted to tell the truth to anyway. She had not been bitter. That was the thing that undid me. Not bitter, not angry, not demanding, just honest. In that particular way, my mother was always honest, the kind that cost her something every time and she paid it anyway. I'm not asking for anything at all. 6 words. And I knew, because I had known Dorothy Carter for 28 years before I lost her, exactly what it had cost her to write them. I came down to breakfast at 8. The dining room was formal. Long dark table, 8 chairs, a sideboard along one wall with breakfast laid out in the Korean style. Steamed rice, soup, small plates of banchan arranged with the precision of a household that had been running the same breakfast service for decades. Mrs. O moved quietly around the edges of the room, refilling things, adjusting angles. She caught my eye once, said nothing. Moved on. Taewon was already seated at the head of the table. Junho sat to his left, Yeonhee beside him, Sungmin across from them, alone on his side of the table, which I was beginning to understand was not an accident but a habit. The youngest son, always slightly separate. I sat across from Junho. Nobody said anything for a moment. Then Taewon said, "Good morning, Jade," in English, and the table adjusted itself around that small declaration the way rooms always adjusted around him. "Good morning," I said. Yeonhee poured tea with perfect attentiveness. Junho served himself without looking at me. Sungmin looked at me with the focused interest of someone reading a document they find genuinely useful. "How did you sleep?" Junho asked. Careful English. Polite. The tone of a man doing his duty correctly. "Well, thank you," I said. "The East Suite is comfortable," Yeonhee offered. "We had it prepared specifically. We, as if it had been her idea. The chrysanthemums were a nice touch," I said. A beat of silence. Yeonhee's cup paused halfway to her lips. Because she hadn't ordered chrysanthemums. She didn't know who had. But she understood, from the way I said it, from the way I looked at her saying it, that the flowers meant something I wasn't explaining. "I'm glad you like them," she said. Mrs. O, at the sideboard, did not look up. Sungmin found me in the garden an hour after breakfast. I'd expected this. He had the energy of someone who had been waiting for a private moment since the foyer the night before, and had been calculating exactly when to take it. He came around the stone path with his hands in his jacket pockets. Casual, unhurried, the performance of someone who just happened to be in the garden at the same time. "Jade," he said. "Sungmin," I said. He stopped beside me, looked at the garden, a traditional Korean garden, mossy stones and a small water feature, and pine trees that were older than anyone currently living in the house. "I want to be honest with you," he said. Here we go, I thought. "I appreciate that," I said. "My brother and his wife are going to make your life here very difficult," he said. "They have investments in a version of this family that doesn't include you. I think you already know that." "I do," I said. I'm not like them, he said. I looked at him. He had a face that was easy to like, sharper than his brother's, more alive, the kind of face that made you feel seen because it was paying such close attention. He probably used that face the way other people used handshakes. What do you want, Sungmin? I said, a slight widening of the eyes, surprised I'd gone there directly. Then a slow smile, genuine this time. I want the succession vote to go differently than it was going to go before you arrived, he said. My brother has been positioned as the heir for 15 years. He's not good at it. He does what Yeonhee tells him, which means the company will do what Yeonhee tells it. He paused. Father knows this. He's been circling the problem for 3 years. And you think my arrival changes the math? I said. I think your arrival changes everything, he said. If father formally acknowledges you, enters your name in the jokbo, the succession line is disrupted. There would need to be a new board conversation. New considerations. He looked at me. I'm not asking you to do anything you weren't already going to do. I'm asking you to understand that you have an ally in this house, whether you want one or not. I looked back at the garden. The water feature moved quietly over the stones. A bird somewhere in the pine trees. Seoul beyond the estate walls, doing its relentless thing. I'm going to say something to you, I said, and I want you to hear it clearly. Of course, he said. I didn't come to Seoul to disrupt a succession line, I said. I didn't come here to be useful to you or to anyone else with a position to protect. I came here because a 70-year-old man asked me to, and because my mother spent 30 years not knowing if he ever thought of her, and because I would like, before I'm done, to understand where I come from. I looked at him. If that happens to inconvenience Junho and Yeonhee, I can live with that. But I'm not your instrument. I want that to be clear from the beginning. Sungmin looked at me for a long moment. Understood, he said. Good, I said. He nodded slowly, started to turn away. Sungmin, I said. He stopped. I don't need an ally, I said, but I'm willing to not have an enemy. That's the best I can offer right now. Something shifted in his expression. Not quite respect, something adjacent to it. The recalibration of someone who has just realized the piece they thought they understood is different than they expected. That's more than I expected, he said. I know, I said. Junho came to find me at 2 in the afternoon. He knocked on the door of the East guest suite, a courtesy that told me he was a different species of problem than his wife. Yeonhee would never have knocked. She would have entered with a reason already prepared. He knocked, waited, stood in the doorway when I opened it with the expression of a man who has been sent to do something he hasn't fully agreed to do. May I come in? He said. Yes, I said. He came in. Stood near the door, didn't sit, didn't make himself comfortable. He looked at the room the way you look at a space you've decided to read for information. His eyes landed on the writing desk, on the letter. His expression didn't change, but something behind it did. He knew what that envelope looked like, or he knew something about it. I filed that away. I want to apologize, he said. In English, careful, deliberate. For Yeonhee, in Atlanta. The folder, he stopped. She told me what she had done. After father came back from Atlanta and told us about you, she told me about the DNA report and the 5 years and, he stopped again. I want you to know I didn't know. About the folder, about any of it. I looked at him. I believe you, I said. Because I did. Junho was not a man who orchestrated things. He was a man who didn't ask enough questions and then had to apologize for the answers. She was trying to protect our family, he said. She was trying to protect your inheritance, I said. Not unkindly. Just precisely. He didn't disagree. This is difficult, he said. What you being here means. For the family structure, for the company. I'm not going to pretend otherwise. I wouldn't want you to, I said. But you're here, he said. Father brought you here himself. And that means, he looked at the window, that means it's real. Whatever we thought before, it's real. It's been real for 32 years, I said. You're all just finding out now. He was quiet for a moment. Your mother, he said. Was she happy? Her life? The question surprised me. Not because it was unexpected, but because it was genuine. He actually wanted to know. She was, I said. She worked hard. She had her sister and her church and her garden on the back porch. I paused. She was the kind of person who made a good life out of whatever she had. She didn't spend much time on what she didn't have. Junho nodded slowly. She sounds, he said carefully, like someone worth knowing. She was, I said. She was exactly that. He moved toward the door. Jade, he said. I waited. I can't promise Yunhee will. He stopped, started again. I can promise that I will not be an obstacle to whatever father decides. To whatever you need. He looked at me directly for the first time since he'd entered the room. That's the most honest thing I can offer you right now. That's enough, I said. He left. I stood in the empty room. Outside the paper screen windows, Seoul afternoon light turned everything amber and still. I looked at the letter on the desk. It's time, I thought. I knocked on the door of Taewon's private study at 4 p.m. He opened it himself, no assistant, no intermediary. He was in his shirt sleeves, the jacket gone, a pair of reading glasses pushed up on his head that I had never seen before. They made him look, briefly, like someone's grandfather. He was someone's grandfather, I realized. He was someone's father. He was my father. That thought still landed new every time. Jade, he said. I need to show you something, I said. May I come in? He stepped back. The study was a working room. Books, documents, a large desk with papers arranged in the precise order of a man who thought in systems. Photographs on one wall. The company, the family, events spanning decades. I didn't look at them closely. Not yet. I crossed to the desk, set the letter down. He looked at it. Then he looked at me. Where did you find this? He said. His voice was very controlled. The control of someone holding something very still because they're afraid of what happens if they let it move. Mrs. Oh, I said. She found it in your father's study in 2012 when the estate was being catalogued. She's been keeping it for 11 years. He sat down slowly in the chair behind the desk. He did not reach for the letter immediately. He looked at it for a long time. The way you look at something you've been waiting for so long that when it finally arrives, you're not sure your hands are steady enough to hold it. She wrote to me, he said, quietly, almost to himself. 1993, I said. You were right, she wrote. And my father intercepted it, I said. Mrs. O saw him take it from the hallway table. Something moved across his face. Not anger. Something older than anger. The particular grief of a man understanding that years of his life were shaped by a decision someone else made in a hallway while he was in a meeting. I wrote to her in 1992, he said. The letter came back. I know, I said. She wrote to you in 1993. That letter never reached you. I paused. Two people writing to each other. Both letters stopped, both of them believing the other one had chosen silence. He looked at the envelope, at my mother's handwriting, at the Atlanta postmark, at the word personal in the bottom left corner, in the handwriting of a woman who had been 26 years old and honest and asking for nothing. She has your eyes, he read. The address line, not the letter, just reading the front of the envelope. Open it, I said. His hands, the same hands I'd watched shake slightly over a teacup in Atlanta, were steady now. He picked up the envelope, opened it. Read. I'd like that, I said. And for the first time since I'd arrived in Seoul, since I'd arrived in Atlanta, since I'd picked up the phone and called Aunt Renee, since I'd stood in a hallway with a severance envelope in my hand 6 years ago and decided that invisible was not the same as invisible forever, I felt something unknot itself in my chest. Not joy, not yet. Something quieter and more durable than joy. Something that felt like ground. I have to stop here for a second, because what just happened in that study, the letter, the photograph, those eyes, I need to know if you felt that. Drop a comment right now. Where are you watching from? What time is it? Because we still have the confrontation. We still have Yunhee. We still have the moment the whole family has to sit in a room together and decide what the truth costs them. Tell me you're here. Let's finish this. Yunhee found out about the letter at 7 p.m. I don't know how. I didn't tell her. Taewon didn't tell her. Mrs. O certainly didn't tell her. But Yunhee had spent 15 years inside this family learning its walls, which ones carried sound, which staff members could be read by the angle of their walk, which closed doors meant something different than other closed doors. She appeared at the door of the East guest suite at 7:15. No knock this time. The door simply opened, She stood in the frame in a deep green silk blouse and dark trousers, her hair down, the blunt cut, the less controlled version of herself she only deployed when she had decided that composure was a less useful tool than presence. "There was a letter," she said, not a question. "Yes," I said. "From your mother." "Yes." "Mrs. O had it." "Yes." She came into the room, closed the door behind her, did not sit, stood near the window, with her arms loose at her sides, the body language of someone who has decided that this conversation will not be managed. "It will simply be had. How long has she had it?" she said. 11 years, I said. Something moved across her face. 11 years. The same timeline as the DNA report, give or take. The same window in which she had known and chosen silence, and Mrs. O had known and chosen waiting. 2 women in the same house sitting on the same secret from different directions. "She should have come to me," Yun-hee said. "Should she?" I said. A pause. "I would have handled it," she said. "The way you handled the DNA report," I said. Her jaw tightened. "I was protecting this family," she said. "For the 3rd time." The same words, the same register. But something was different this time. The 3rd time a person says the same justification, it has started to sound like a question they're asking themselves. "Yun-hee," I said. I sat down on the edge of the bed, looked at her. "I want to ask you something, and I want you to actually answer it. Not the answer you've prepared, the real one." She looked at me with the particular wariness of someone who has survived many conversations by controlling which questions get asked. "Ask," she said. "Did you ever consider," I said, "that telling him might have made him happier?" Silence. "He has been carrying that grief for 30 years, I said. "You've watched him carry it. You've been in this family long enough to know what it looks like on him. The way he goes still sometimes, the way he sits in rooms alone, the way he keeps a photograph of a woman nobody in this family ever talks about on the wall of his private study." I paused. "You knew what she was to him, and you made a choice to keep me away from him. I'm asking you honestly, did you ever think about what it cost him? Not what my existence costs your children, what his not knowing cost him." The room was very quiet. Yun-hee stood at the window. Seoul evening light behind her, the city going dark outside, lights coming on across the mountain. "Yes," she said. One word, the quietest she'd spoken since Atlanta. "Yes," she said again. I thought about it. "And?" I said. She looked at her hands. "And I decided," she said slowly, "that what he didn't know couldn't hurt him. That stability, the company, the succession, the family's position, was worth more than—" She stopped. I told myself I was protecting everyone. The children, my husband, the chairman himself. She paused. "I think I understand now that I was mostly protecting myself." I looked at her. This was not the answer I had expected. Not because I hadn't suspected it, I had, but because I hadn't expected her to say it out loud. Yun-hee had struck me from the first morning in the Atlanta kitchen as a woman who would take her real motivations to the grave before she'd give someone else the satisfaction of naming them. "That's the most honest thing you've said to me," I said. "Don't make too much of it," she said. The composure returning. Not the brittle performed version, but something steadier underneath. "I'm not absolved by saying it, I know that." "No," I said. "You're not." "What happens now?" she said. "That's up to Taewon," I said. "It was always up to him. That's what you got wrong from the beginning. You thought if you controlled the information, you controlled the outcome. But the outcome was always his to make. You just delayed it." She looked out the window for a long time. "Your mother," she said. "The letter." What did she say? "She told him I existed," I said. "She told him I had his eyes. She said she wasn't asking for anything. She just wanted him to know." Yun-hee closed her eyes briefly. "She sounds," she said quietly, "like someone who deserved better." "She did," I said. "She deserved a great deal better. From a lot of people." Yun-hee opened her eyes, looked at me with something I had not seen on her face before. Not warmth. She was not capable of warmth toward me yet, and I respected her enough not to expect it. But something adjacent, something that looked faintly like recognition. One woman looking at another and understanding, for the first time, that they are not in the same position and never were, but that the distance between them is not as absolute as one of them had spent 5 years pretending it was. I'll speak to Junho, she said, about the board, about the jokbo process. We won't obstruct it. I looked at her. Not because I've changed everything I think, she said. Precise, honest. But because I was wrong, and I understand that now. And I would like, she stopped. I would like to do at least one thing correctly in this situation. That's enough, I said. She nodded once. Move to the door. Yeon-hee, I said. She stopped. The chrysanthemums in my room, I said. Did you order them? She turned. No, she said. I assumed you had requested them. I hadn't. A pause. We both knew who had. Mrs. O has been in this house a long time, Yeon-hee said. 31 years, I said. Something moved across her face. Not quite guilt. The precursor to guilt, the moment before a person begins to understand what they haven't been paying attention to. She left. I sat in the room alone. The white chrysanthemums on the dresser caught the lamplight. Mrs. O had put them there. Before she knew if I'd find her note. Before she knew if I'd come to the kitchen. Before she knew anything except that a woman named Jade Carter had once loved the man who owned this house, and that her daughter was coming to stay in the East guest suite, and that white chrysanthemums were the right thing to put in a room for a woman like that. 31 years of waiting to do one right thing. She had done it. Sung-min looked at me. When you got here, he said, I came to the garden and told you that you had an ally in me, and you told me you didn't need an ally but you were willing to not have an enemy. He paused. I've been thinking about that. I think I offered you the wrong thing. I was thinking about what your arrival meant for me, for the succession, for my position, instead of thinking about what it must have cost you to get here. He paused. So I'd like to start again, not as an ally with an agenda, as a brother, if that's something you'd eventually be willing to consider. The room was quiet. I looked at Sung-min, at his sharp face and his calculating intelligence, and the thing underneath both of them that was, I was beginning to see, something genuine that he had learned to bury under strategy, because strategy was safer in this family than sincerity. Eventually, I said. He nodded. That was enough. Junho cleared his throat. I'd like to say something too, he said. We waited. I know I haven't. He stopped. I know this has been another stop. Junho, I was learning, was a man who knew what he wanted to say and consistently lost it somewhere between his chest and his mouth. I'm sorry, he said finally. For what Yeon-hee did, for what I didn't stop, for the 5 years. He looked at me. I'm sorry. Thank you, I said. Yeon-hee said nothing, but her hand, on the table, moved 1 inch toward her husband's. And he covered it with his. That was all. That was, I thought, probably the beginning of something. Not forgiveness, not yet, not from me, not earned yet, but the beginning of the space where forgiveness eventually becomes possible. I found Mrs. O in the stone garden after the meeting. She was trimming something, a low hedge along the garden path, small, precise cuts with a pair of scissors that were older than most of the household staff. I stood beside her. She didn't stop trimming. How did it go? She said. Well, I said, I think. The chairman was clear. Very, I said. She nodded, kept trimming. Mrs. O, I said. The chrysanthemums. In my room. Her scissors paused. Your mother loved chrysanthemums, she said simply. She told me once in a letter. No, not a letter. Before. When the chairman first came back from Atlanta, he talked about her sometimes. When he was sitting in this garden, talking to himself more than to me, she paused. He said she kept flowers in the house always, that she cut the stems at an angle, that the apartment always smelled like something living. I looked at the garden. You put them there for her, I said. I put them there for both of you, she said. For her, because she never got to come here, and she should have. And for you, because you did. I stood in the stone garden in the Seoul morning air, cold and pine-scented and carrying the particular quality of a city that has been standing in the same place for a very long time. Mrs. O, I said, when you found the letter in 2012, why didn't you give it to him then? She was quiet for a moment, still trimming. Because I didn't know, she said. If he was ready. He had lost his father. He was managing the company through a difficult period. He was careful those years. Closed. She paused. And I thought if I gave it to him without the right context, without the right time, it would only be another grief to carry. Another thing he'd lost. Another thing that had been taken. She stopped trimming, looked at me. "But you being here," she said, "that changes what the letter is. It's not a grief anymore. It's a proof." She looked at me steadily. Proof that Dorothy Carter told the truth, that she tried, that she was the person he remembered her being. She paused. That's a different thing to receive, a much better thing. I looked at this woman, 68 years old, 31 years in this house, scissors in her hand, trimming a hedge in a stone garden in Seoul on a cold morning. "She would have liked you," I said. Mrs. O considered this. "I think I would have liked her," she said. "Very much." I went to the study at 4 p.m. Taewon was at his desk. He looked up when I knocked, gestured to the chair across from him, the same chair I'd sat in the day before when I'd given him the letter. I sat. We looked at each other for a moment. "The photograph on your wall," I said. "The two of you." "In Atlanta." He glanced at it. 1991, he said. Haeundae Street, near the apartment building I lived in during the fellowship. A student took it for us with a disposable camera. He paused. "Your mother sent me a copy before I left. I've had it here since." He stopped. "Since I came back. 32 years. The photograph had been on that wall for 32 years. "She's laughing," I said. "She was always laughing," he said. "She found something funny in almost everything. It used to drive me." He stopped. Something passed across his face. "I used to tell her that her laugh was going to get us thrown out of every restaurant in Atlanta." "Did it?" "Once," he said. "A very quiet French restaurant on Peachtree. She laughed at something I said. I don't even remember what. And the maitre d' came over." He shook his head slowly. "She apologized so sincerely that he brought us complimentary dessert." I laughed. A real one, surprised out of me. He looked at me when I laughed, and I saw it happen. The thing my mother had written about in the letter. His eyes going still. That particular stillness of a man thinking something he's not yet ready to say out loud. "What?" I said. "You laugh like her," he said quietly. I stopped. "The sound of it," he said. "The way it comes out, sudden, like it surprised you too." He looked at me. "I haven't heard that laugh in 32 years. The study was very quiet. Outside the window, Seoul afternoon light. Gold and long and sideways. The same golden hour light that had been in the Atlanta garden when everything began. "Taewon?" I said. He looked at me. "She knew?" I said. "At the end. In the last years. I think she always suspected the letter had been stopped. She never said it directly. That wasn't her way. But she stopped being angry about it a long time before she died. She said once." I paused, finding the words precisely. "She said that some people carried doors with them their whole lives. The doors that closed on them, and the ones who figure out how to put the door down, they're the ones who get to see what's on the other side." He was very still. "She put the door down," I said, "a long time before the end. I just didn't know what door she meant." He looked at the photograph on the wall. "For a long time. She was wiser than me," he said finally. "She always was." "Yes," I said, "she was. Instead, it's not the same thing, but it's not nothing." "It's not nothing," I said. We sat with that for a while. The tea went cold. Neither of us mentioned it. I thought about Dorothy Carter, 26 years old in Vine City, Atlanta, writing a letter she wasn't sure would be answered, asking for nothing, offering everything, cutting flowers at an angle on a back porch with rose bushes from the Home Depot on MLK, telling her daughter once in a kitchen that some doors close from the outside. She had been right. She had also forgotten to mention that the people on the other side of those doors spend just as long wondering what's behind them. She had forgotten to mention Seoul. She had forgotten to mention a stone garden going dark at sunset, and a man with her daughter's eyes sitting on a bench with his hands around a cold cup of tea, finally, allowed to put the door down. But maybe she knew. Maybe she always knew. Maybe that's why she named me after the French word for day. Jour. Every day you were born into was a day he gave her, even if he never knew it. Even if it took 32 years for the door to open. Even so. My mother used to say that the truth has a way of finding the light. Not quickly, not kindly, not on anyone's schedule but its own. But eventually, always eventually, it finds it. I came to Seoul not knowing what I was walking into. I came with 2 bags and a letter I hadn't opened, and the name of a man I'd never met who turned out to have been missing me for 32 years without knowing what he was missing. I found a woman named Mrs. O, who had been keeping a piece of my mother alive in a stone garden in Jongno-gu for 31 years, waiting for the right person to give it to. I found a letter my mother wrote when she was 26 years old that never arrived, and I got to be the one to deliver it. I found a photograph on a wall that told me everything I needed to know about what my mother had been to someone before she was mine. And I found, in a family that didn't want me, in a house that had been built to keep me out, in a city I'd never been to, something I hadn't known I was looking for. Not a father, not exactly, not yet. Ground. Just ground. The kind that holds. My mother said some doors close from the outside. She was right. But she also put down the door she was carrying a long time before the end. And now I understand why. You can't walk through a door you're still holding. Let it go and walk through. Seoul is still waiting, and for the first time in 32 years, so am I. And that's episode 2. I need to know. The letter scene, the garden at the end, Mrs. O and the chrysanthemums. Which moment stayed with you? Drop it in the comments. Tell me where you're watching from and what time it is. And if you've been here since episode 1, you already know what this channel is. Subscribe, hit the bell, share this with someone who needs a story about what happens when the truth finally finds the light. Episode 3 is coming, Jade is in Seoul now, the Jokbo process begins, and Yeonhee, who has been very quiet, is about to make one last move that nobody in that house saw coming. See you then.